Upskilling and reskilling aren't just buzzwords. They're key factors in attracting and retaining workers in today's talent marketplace. As technology and automation continue to reshape industries, candidates are looking for employers who offer pathways for skill development. At the same time, companies need to fill critical skill gaps and future-proof their workforce. So, how can organizations create a compelling candidate experience that prioritizes career growth? And how can job seekers evaluate whether an employer truly values learning and development? Welcome to Yo's Back to Work podcast. I'm your host, Joe McIntyre. Joining me for this episode is Becca Donovan, Director of HR and Organizational Development at Yo. In her role, Becca develops and puts in place strategies that contribute to the success of organizations. Becca uses human resource management tools to influence short and long-term success for organizations. She also leads the development and deployment of Yo's contractor and client engagement framework. Becca, welcome to Back to Work.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here today.
Well, it's great to have you. So maybe we can begin with the big picture. What exactly is upskilling and what is reskilling?
Overall, in my mind, both of them help somebody be successful. And then when you get into breaking them up a little bit, upskilling is building on the skills and capabilities that you already have. So for example, you're developing someone or developing yourself so that there's deeper knowledge or stronger skills in that person's current or adjacent role. Now, flipping over to reskilling, it's about pivoting and shifting. So for this example, this is developing someone or yourself that is showing characteristics or attributes that will be successful in a different role altogether.
Got it. How have these two, I don't what do you even call them? I don't even know what you call reskilling and upskilling. These two offerings, I guess. I don't know. What would you say?
Or learning facets or facets.
How have they changed the way companies attract and retain talent in your eyes? I'm sure these have both evolved over the past few years, especially. But how have they changed the way companies attract and retain?
Absolutely. So I think they're kind of like the newer buzzwords going on right now. And in my mind, it comes down to the value proposition that the organization has. So it's the organization or company saying to a candidate and an employee, we, said company, are going to invest in you if you work with us. And here are some ways that we now will invest in your career and development.
Now, as a leading international talent and outsourcing company like Yo is, can you talk about the company's approach to upskilling and reskilling in today's competitive environment? I know it's harder than ever to find talent, to find the right talent at the right time. So what is Yo doing in this front?
Yeah, absolutely. And it really is getting more and more difficult. And so we're basing some of our strategic initiatives in this space. And, we're committed to fostering talent growth by providing a comprehensive development opportunities on an employee's first day. So day one, when you're here, we are invested in you. So this includes reimbursement programs for education and certifications, giving people immediate access to a learning platform, and where that'll feature both technical and soft skill development. And then we also ensure that there's personalized learning pathways that are aligned with both that employee's current and future career goals.
Now, I think many employees today are fearful of change, especially as automation technology comes into the workforce. Even employees in non-technical roles are being encouraged to develop skills in coding, automation, data analysis, things like that. How can leaders effectively support this transition? It can be daunting for employees to think that they need to learn all this stuff, but how can leaders kind of help them through that?
Yeah, I think this is an important role of a leader because it gets to having strong communication skills and also expectation setting for their employee. So leaders can communicate and show how these skills are important to the person's role and how that person's job will be easier if they're actually utilizing these skills. And leaders can communicate a way to make these skills relevant to an employee. So starting to draw the connections of the why. Why is this important and why this will make your job easier? And then ultimately, the leader needs to support the employee by allowing time for learning curves. So knowing that we're not going to get it right away, but helping them along the way and on their learning journey, and providing additional learning and development opportunities or mentorship, maybe with somebody who is really good in this space, and then other hands-on projects so that employee can develop those skills.
Got it. Now, as companies are encouraging or in many cases probably demanding that their employees learn these new skills, I'm sure companies want to track how it's going. They want to see the data, they want to evaluate it. How can companies measure the impact of their upskilling and reskilling initiatives on both hiring efforts and retention efforts?
Yeah, so good question. I think some ideas can be centered around the type of candidate that is interviewing. And what I mean by that is, are you getting more qualified candidates than you were before? And looking at your time to fill, is that actually you're shorter or smaller than what it was in the past because you're getting these more qualified candidates from the very beginning? Talk to your talent acquisition team and see what they're seeing too. Is it this influx of great talent, and are they all having certain skills? Or is it where they still have to like really dig and pick and choose as to who they're putting in front of you? Looking at attrition rates too, once an employee gets here, you want that number to be lower. You want people to stay once they're at your organization. We can also look at tenure of new hires. You can look at promotion rate of new hires. So that kind of gets into the reskilling a little bit of like looking at either adjacent or new roles that people are taking on. And so ultimately, that's internal mobility and how quickly that an employee is moving throughout the organization. So those are just a couple off the top of my head, but the list can absolutely go on.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if you look back, as these upskilling and reskilling efforts have continued to emerge, we're seeing more and more roles in the workforce that didn't even exist probably 5 years ago, and new ones are expected to keep coming up in the next 5 years. So, how can hiring managers, at least in your mind, future-proof their workforce as much as they can for what could be a wildly different future? Obviously, upskilling and reskilling are part of that, but is there something else that we're missing?
I don't know if we're missing anything, but I think a leader needs to pay particular attention to their strategy and mapping out what skills and abilities are needed for that strategic direction and hitting that strategy, and then paying particular attention to those specific skills and abilities that then can be transferable and flexible. So it's a little bit twofold. Let's figure out what we really need, and then let's see if these are static or dynamic skills that we need our employees or candidates to bring to the table. And then really look at the talent you have and determine if upskilling, reskilling, or buying talent is what's needed.
Yeah. A lot of what we talked about so far is, I think, geared towards hiring managers, geared towards leaders, but I want to shift a little bit to the candidates or the employees or workers who are going to be asked to have to be reskilled. That can be, at least in my mind, it's a scary word. Learning a whole new bunch of skills can seem very daunting. So, how can companies, how can leaders work with their employees, work with candidates to view reskilling as an opportunity rather than a threat of, them potentially losing their job due to someone else going in or AI going in? How can they view, or rather, how can they make employees view this as a positive way?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it can and could be scary, because we're comfortable. We are by nature comfortable people and like to operate with things that are within our control. You can, in a way, use then an upskilling or reskilling and have that be in your control. And here's an example, maybe utilizing AI. A former colleague and I were talking about this actually, and she shared a quote with me that was also shared with her. So, kind of backing up where this credit is due, that you're not going to lose your job to AI, but you're going to lose your job to somebody who is using AI. So it's really getting versed in how to use it to your advantage, whether you're looking at, um, whether it's Chat GPT or just different ways that AI is playing a role in helping make your job easier. So, it's something that in my mind should that everybody should consider just kind of storing in their career toolkit and looking at various avenues to learn how to use it again, like I said, to your advantage. So I feel like the future is now, and AI is always going to be evolving. And oftentimes that might be uncomfortable, but maybe reframing your mindset that change also equates into opportunity and new opportunities. So think about reflecting and developing yourself to better understand that how you can use AI for your job, or how you might be able to use it for the future. And so for some, when you reflect, this might be, hey, I need to upskill myself. I need to be doing something a little bit differently. Others, it might be, hey, I need to reskill because I'm not using it at all. And I need to figure out how to um, utilize it to my advantage, so that, again, I can just, be even more successful.
Mhm. Yeah, we also have a lot of candidates or employees who are listening to this, and I think we need to talk a little bit about how people who have the skills already can work with their managers to identify what skills they need, what skills they should prioritize. So, is there any way, or are there any tips that you have for workers to either identify what skill gaps they have and work to fix them, and then work with their hiring manager, or rather, they're just their regular manager, to figure out what they need? It seems like it should be a two-way street of like, hey, I'm an employee, I'm coming to my boss saying, hey, what can I learn to be better? And then also the boss saying, hey, here's what you need. Is there a best way to do that?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing, if any manager out there has an employee that is coming to them with like, "Hey, I'm hungry to learn more. I want to do, I want to do even better at my job," hang on to that employee, because they're some of the ones that are demonstrating that learning mindset that you'd want to have. So, um, depending upon the organization, if there's a competency model or framework, they can take a look at that and really evaluate themselves on, how am I doing as it relates to behaviors and skills that are needed for my job and to be successful. You can also utilize other conversations, like various performance management conversations or career development conversations, to reflect and say, all right, this is really maybe some areas where I need to grow and improve. And then taking those things to your manager of, hey, I know I need to grow in, if we want to use like the AI skills example, I know I need to grow here. I'm not sure where to go. Can you help me out with maybe some learnings, or various trainings that I can take? And then the manager, it's incumbent upon them, one, to listen, two, to help maybe the employee to do some help them with the research on finding the particular course or skill that might be helpful. And then, like I mentioned a little bit ago, that learning curve and allowing time for the employee to understand and utilize the new skill that they are in the process of developing. Because, it's a new skill. We might, make mistakes. We have all fallen off bikes when we've tried to ride, but, we end up getting there. So it's kind of the same thing with work. We might have some bumps in the road with learning a new skill, but ultimately, we'll get there if we have that learning mindset and agility. So I think, again, having a collaborative, communicative approach to the person's development would be really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, with the scarcity of talent, especially when you're looking for skills in AI or some, super advanced technology, finding those people, I'm assuming, can be very difficult. And companies are looking maybe sometimes for that perfect candidate. But you mentioned something about, those candidates and those employees that have that desire or that eagerness to learn and to grow. Do you find, at least for specialists in recruiting, specialists in talent acquisition, that you are prioritizing when you're looking for people, those who want to grow, those who want to learn, sometimes just as much or maybe even more so than people who already have those skills that the company is looking for? What is the kind of balance there, maybe?
Yeah, that's an awesome question, because that, I feel like, is where our talent acquisition team and our recruiters, that's where their mindset is. They're very good at looking at somebody's resume, and after their first time talking with somebody, to determine, okay, yeah, they have these transferable skills. So we can do a lot more, organizations can do a lot more with somebody who has these transferable, flexible skills than somebody who already has, it checks every single box on a resume. Because at that point, um, they might be a very much of an SME in a role, and that's what we might be looking for. Great. But then there's also the flip side that if somebody, it looks great 80% on paper and via um, their interview, that gives the organization an ability to grow and develop them even more so that they can be part of that future and that future success because they're not already in, say, in a box. So I do think that's where some of the, like I said, the recruiting team and talent acquisition team's mindset shift as well on looking at what can be again flexible or malleable based on what the person's bringing to the table.
And that's, I'm sure, where the best recruiters, the best talent acquisition folks thrive because we can help businesses find talent, not just for today, but for tomorrow too. The same people we hire today are built for you to help them grow in the future. So that seems very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then it goes back to the retention piece. Now you don't have to, you're not constantly cycling and churning of refilling a role. You have that person who you can, keep for the organization for, 3 to 5 years or longer. But you're giving them the opportunities to continue to then upskill and reskill.
Yeah. Do you see anything changing or evolving in the future? Maybe take your crystal ball out a little bit and talk to us about, what are the trends in upskilling and reskilling? Where does the future of talent potentially go from here? There's just so much changing at a rapid pace. It can be a lot for people, but where do you see the future of talent acquisition, especially as it relates to upskilling and reskilling?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a question that's going to be asked of hiring managers and recruiters now, maybe almost all the time, of what is the company's stance on upskilling and reskilling. And if we don't have an answer to that, I think that then that would be pretty telling to the candidate that's like, they are not going to develop me. So I do think it's going to be a question, and they'll ask for the opportunities and looking at how then that connects to job satisfaction, career development, and overall well-being. So again, the more mature organizations that are already doing this, they'll be able to tie that upskilling and reskilling and the development to, we have people that are happy and engaged and motivated here. That internal mobility, people have moved around, they've taken lateral roles, they've taken vertical movement, they've moved into a new business unit, what have you. And from a, overall well-being perspective, because they have the managers that have their backs to take a little bit of risk and, have that learning curve, it's helpful to know that it, like that in a way, and I'm using air quotes here, that it's okay to make a mistake, that, and that helps people, not have anxiety with work and things of that nature. So, yeah, so I think that it's going to be really important to have answers to those questions and to maybe even provide some solid examples to candidates of how then various upskilling and reskilling has worked out for people in the organization.
Becca, are there ways that talent teams can collaborate with hiring managers to ensure that internal mobility, specifically, and career pathing are part of the hiring conversation from the very, very beginning?
Yes, and I have a lot of thoughts on this one. I think this is a perfect example of successful hiring managers and managers overall because they have, meaning the hiring managers and managers, have strong, trusting partnerships with people in HR. And I'm talking about their HR business partners and then those other HR partners in talent functions like talent acquisition or recruiting, learning, and the talent management side. So while hiring managers possess valuable insight into the very specific skills and experiences required for success of the role, partnering closely then with these teams and talent acquisition is essential. And so it's because the talent acquisition teams are actually the subject matter experts in your market trends, candidate evaluation. They're consistently engaging with both active and passive talent, and they're the front door to the company. So they build relationships, observe long-term talent success, and then they gain a unique understanding too of the skills that will then drive career progression. So now we're moving into like, okay, an employee or a candidate has been brought in as an employee. And then this collaborative trust then is the foundation for successful talent outcomes and long-term organizational success. And then on the talent management front, these specific HR partners can arm the hiring manager with examples to share with the candidates around internal movements that people have made and career growth. And they can talk about actual career pathing and how people particularly got there. And that could have been through avenues like the mentoring, self-paced learning, taking on special assignments. And overall, there are just thoughtful plans behind people and their development and moves.
Got it. Now, Becca, I think final question for you. Before we started recording, you mentioned this word that I wasn't familiar with called adjacencies, where people can kind of use what skills they have and find an adjacent job or adjacent skills there. Can you explain how that actually works to our listeners here? It's a kind of a fascinating concept.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was thinking about this, there's a book that maybe some of you have read called Lessons in Chemistry. And at a very high level, if you think about the main character and she wants to be a scientist, and ultimately the time frame that it's set in, she's a female, she's not given much credit in that particular profession and in that world. So she figured out a way throughout the course of the book to use her skills and put it into an adjacent or a similar type role and have a cooking/baking show. And for anybody that has ever baked, that it comes down to science and having the exact right measurements or weights. So she was able to utilize adjacencies from her pure love and passion of being a scientist and finding a way to be successful and having a cooking/baking show and utilize those skills to her advantage.
That's perfect. It's just a way to use the things that you are interested in, the skills that you have, and just a small pivot. It may seem like a big pivot to go from science or chemistry to baking, but there are elements of both in each. That's a very cool concept. I love that.
Yeah. So people out there that, that are listening, think about things like that you're like, I don't know how I'm going to use this skill. Push yourself to maybe think outside of the box and why it would be important for you.
Perfect. Well, Becca, this has been great. Thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. If our listeners wanted to connect with you, reach out to you, how can they do that?
So I am happy for anybody to connect with me on LinkedIn. It's Becca Donovan. You'll see, if you find me via you're going in the right avenue. I'm also welcome to chat via email, and that's rebecca.donovan@zim.com. And I'm open to collaborating more. And I just want to say thank you for having me on the podcast today. I was thrilled to be asked and thrilled to be here. So it was really exciting, and I appreciate the conversation.
Of course, us too. I also want to thank our listeners as well for tuning in to this episode of Yo's Back to Work podcast. To hear future episodes, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen in. For Yo's Back to Work, I'm Joe McIntyre. Thanks for listening.